Hi, I'm Tom Hollingsworth from Gestalt IT, and we're here at VMware Explore 2023 talking to some great companies about exciting enterprise technology, like Commvault.
Hi, I'm Thomas Bryant. I'm Director of Product Marketing here at Commvault.
Thomas, thanks for joining us today. You and I have been in technology for quite a while. We've seen a lot of really interesting stuff. But one of the things that always surprises me is how quickly security kind of moves and changes. And to be talking to Commvault, which, let's be honest, people watching at home probably think of Commvault as, oh, the backup company.
Yeah.
But really, you guys are not in backup anymore. You're really doing data protection, which sounds similar, but there's a little bit more to it. What are Commvault's people looking at when it comes to data protection?
Yeah, I mean, the market's changed a lot, and the use cases that customers are after have changed a lot. So customers are caring about backup and recovery, but really, why do you back up data? It's to recover data. And when you think about security now, when we start talking about ransomware and bad threat actors, one of the first things that they go after now is data protection platforms. They want to try to lock you out because they can't get their ransom if you can restore all of your data. So it's changed a lot.
I mean, it makes sense. If what you're trying to do is get people to pay to get their data back, and you can go, no, I'll just go to my tape library and get it back, but thanks for trying. They're like, no, I've got to find a way to slip in. So are you starting to see more people trying to attack those critical infrastructure pieces before they're ready to encrypt the data?
Yeah, absolutely. Customers are seeing more and more with threat actors coming into their environment. They're trying to get into the data protection systems, and what they'll do is they'll do things like change the retention policy to 1 day. And then now they won't be able to actually recover that data because they only have 1 day of retention. They have nowhere to go back to in points of time. It makes it more difficult.
Now, I would assume that Commvault probably has some policies in place that would allow me to say, oh, wait, somebody changed that, and you probably want to go take a look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of different technologies, things like multi-person authentication, multi-factor authentication that you can use to secure your environment. But it's really a multi-layered approach, right? It's how do we protect the data that we want to be able to recover, but how can we get in front of the problem and actually reduce the time to detection for those customers?
Yeah, and I know that that's something that a lot of companies are really starting to look at is that dwell time. And let's be fair, we've seen a lot of major hacks in the last 3 or 4 years where the attackers were inside of the system for days, weeks before anybody ever knew that. And by the time they were able to detect them, it was already too late. So I'm assuming that Commvault has some cool things to be able to kind of detect that ahead of time so that even though people maybe are trying to do small bits to kind of test where their limits are, that you guys will see that before anybody else does?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see a lot more of these bad actors, again, living off the land and just using existing commands and things that are in the systems that aren't being detected by malware, and things like Yara rules aren't going to pick them up. So we have a technology called ThreatWise, and what that does is it allows us to have earlier detection by placing decoys. So you could almost kind of think of some of it like a more advanced version of like a honeypot, to where we put out these decoys for critical pieces of your infrastructure. Think like Active Directory or websites, things that the bad actors are going to try to attack. And that way, when we see people trying to get into things that they normally wouldn't get into, we can have that earlier warning that people are in there and they're trying to move laterally through your systems.
Almost like a dangling carrot with its own attached stick. So if you touch the carrot, we know something's up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that a lot of threat actors are starting to try to automate as much of this as they can because whether or not they're working in these giant collectives or being backed by bigger organizations, they still have to do the most that they can with the least amount of time possible. It's almost like us with our jobs.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that these kinds of decoys and this, all of these solutions will allow me to detect that kind of lateral movement and shut it down quickly, right?
Yeah, I mean, the idea really is one, to be able to become aware of it. So alerting and being able to send those alerts to the right people are important because, let's face it, data protection folks are generally not the security folks. They're not SecOps. So really that's where our integrations with things like Microsoft Sentinel or Palo Alto Networks XSOAR become important, because it's one thing for data protection people to know it, but then being able to get it to the right folks and make that actionable, that's the next step of that kind of, I don't know if you call it kill chain or whatever you want to call it, but to continue to move through that process and reduce the time that bad actor's in there.
I know that alert fatigue is something that a lot of people complain about frequently because I'm getting inundated with the system telling me, okay, this looks good, maybe that could be bad. It sounds like Commvault has some ways to kind of get around that, or at least deliver the critical stuff to the people who need to see it ahead of time so that you don't have someone dwelling for months or longer doing things. Now, what are you guys talking about here at VMware Explore?
Yeah, we're talking about a lot of things. So obviously we're talking about security, but we're also talking about multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, and customers' journeys through that. Because as much as a lot of us that have been in this space for a long time think multi-cloud and hybrid cloud have been around for a while, a lot of folks are still early in that journey, and they're trying to figure out what workloads can we move, how do we move those workloads, and especially things like replatforming that can be difficult. Well, actually data protection lends itself to that very well, because we now have the ability to migrate data, right, through things like replication. It seems maybe somewhat passe, but it's a real problem that customers face every day.
I know that a lot of companies that I've talked to that are trying to do kind of a cloud migration, they've got the framework in place, but then when they look at what it's going to cost to move that data back and forth using certain native tools, they get a little sticker shock and decide that maybe that's not the best way to do it. But it sounds like Commvault can help migrate that data, and not only that, but ensure that it's properly sent and written and is valid and everything, and protected from the sounds of it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really important that we validate that data, but absolutely. So a lot of what we're doing is automation, right? At the end of the day, it's moving and migrating that data, but then doing that validation and the automation to make sure that the data, once it gets there, is your data and that you can bring those workloads up. And again, when you're replatforming, right, maybe you're moving from on-prem vSphere to VMC on AWS. Maybe you're looking at a different hypervisor. So we have to look at how we can replatform that data at the same time, and again, validate that it will actually come up when you need it to.
Sounds like you put a lot of thought into kind of how to extend the capabilities that you already have to embrace all of the challenges that people have today when it comes to making sure their data is safe, secure, and not going to get destroyed anytime soon. What are some things on the horizon that are kind of appealing to you that you think that people should be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting things in our space, of course, AI and ML are big everywhere, and we're obviously continuing to invest in that. And we have a lot of AI and ML baked into our products today. But I think that's going to be an area that we'll continue to see. And we see a lot of folks in the industry starting to look at how can we use AI to, one, protect our data, but also as we move more and we start to shift left in that security conversation, how we can use AI to be able to detect faster and be able to prevent bad actors from doing things.
And is that shifting left part of the conversation? Is that something Commvault is invested in, making sure that you're kind of an integral part of it from inception? Because we always joke, security is embedded into everything that you remember to put it into. And it doesn't seem like a lot of companies are even thinking about that in the early stages of building those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a natural evolution a lot for like data protection folks. Much like me when I was in Wintel and then this thing called VMware and vSphere came around, my career evolved over time. And I think that's what we're seeing is that the data protection folks, their job is changing and they're becoming more of that security kind of mindset, which is good because a lot of customers and a lot of companies are investing more in security. And so it's a natural evolution for them and it's a natural evolution for data protection platforms.
So Thomas, a lot of people who are watching this, obviously after VMware Explore, are maybe probably curious to hear a little bit more about some of the stuff that you've been building. For those that didn't make it to the show or maybe catching this a little bit later on, where can people go to learn more about some of these solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. They can go to commvault.com and see all of the new solutions that we had. We actually did a big security launch just recently in June. So they can learn about all the new products that we came out with at that time. They can do trials, they can see demo videos of the products, and reach out to sales folks from there.
All right. Well, and for those of you out there who love some of the content that we make here, along with companies like Commvault, head over to gestaltit.com. More great interviews from events like this, as well as some long-form content, podcasts, weekly news shows, you name it, we have everything you need there. Gestaltit.com is your home for all things enterprise IT. We'll be bringing you more great interviews from VMware Explore with some great companies. And please make sure you check out commvault.com for all of the great solutions that they have. I'm sure there's something that will fit the needs that you have.